Good. Okay, this is your captain speaking. Welcome everyone to Yam Kineres. The Gemara says, why is this Yam called the Kineres? Because its water is sweet like a kinar. The water of the Kineres is sweet like a harp. So you may ask, sweet like a harp? A harp is not a taste, a harp is a sound. Why would you compare water and say it's sweet like a sound? Rabbi Yosef Engel says, from here we see all senses are connected. So when something sounds good, it also tastes good. You could say it's sweet like a harp. But I want to share with you the historical importance of the Yam Kineres. We're going to talk about one of the greatest personalities who lived in this area, Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital. The Chidah says Reb Chaim Vital, B'Yisrael Gadol Shemoy. Now, Reb Chaim Vital was a student of the Alshech, Maram Alshech, Rav Moshe Alshech in Pshat. But then, Reb Chaim Vital began to learn the Kabbalah. Now, before Reb Chaim Vital studied from the Arizal, Reb Chaim Vital already wrote an entire commentary on the Zohar. Reb Chaim Vital was in Damascus. And don't try this at home, but the Arizal wanted Reb Chaim Vital. So every night, the Arizal, all the way from Tzfas, went to Damascus. He didn't actually go, he remained in Tzfas. He took out the neshama of Reb Chaim Vital, and he started to beckon him, come to Tzfas, come to Tzfas, come to Tzfas. And actually this is brought in the Shivchei Reb Chaim Vital, that every night Reb Chaim Vital was in Damascus, and the Arizal would come to him. The Arizal would say, why don't you come to learn from me in Tzfas? Come to Tzfas. And Reb Chaim Vital thought it was a joke. I should learn from you. I'm already a great gadol in Kabbalah. Until finally, he had a question on the Zohar he couldn't answer, and another question. He said, let me see for myself. Let me go to Tzfas and see what this Arizal is all about. And the Arizal answered his first question. Now the Arizal answered his second question. When he got to his third question, the Arizal said, Ad kan tchum Shabbos, I can't answer you anymore. Enough. Shoin Genik. And he pushed him away. And Reb Chaim Vital was so upset that the Arizal did not accept him and teach him more, that Reb Chaim Vital did tshuva and he fasted, and then he went back to the Ari, and the Arizal said, you know what, really, I should have cast you away because it took you 3 months until you came to me. But because you did tshuva last night, I will accept you as my student. And Reb Chaim Vital became the primary disciple of the Arizal, to the extent that the Arizal said and gave an admonition that no one else is allowed to record and transmit his teachings except for Reb Chaim Vital. Now actually, just as an aside, there was a branch of the Arizal's Kabbalah that was given over to Talmidim who preceded Reb Chaim Vital, namely Rabbi Yisrael Saruk. So you may have heard of Ramami Pano. Ramami Pano was a student of Rabbi Yisrael Saruk, and Rabbi Yisrael Saruk was, so to speak, grandfathered in to be able to give over the teachings of the Ari before the Arizal gave his admonition that no one is allowed to transmit his teaching other than Reb Chaim Vital. Now, as we mentioned, the Alshech was the Rebbe of Reb Chaim Vital in Pshat. And the Alshech wanted to go to the Arizal, and the Ari would not teach him. And the Alshech was put in a very awkward position, because here he is, he's Reb Chaim Vital's Rebbe, but Reb Chaim Vital and the Ari are not allowing him, the Rebbe of Reb Chaim Vital, to go learn from the Arizal, until finally the Alshech goes to the Arizal, and he says, this is so incongruous. I'm Reb Chaim Vital's Rebbe, and I shouldn't be able to learn from you, Ari, and the Ari would say, if you want to learn this material, you have to learn it from Reb Chaim Vital. And Reb Moshe Alshech said, to learn Reb Chaim Vital, I'm his Rebbe. Finally, the Arizal said, Reb Moshe Alshech, you don't need to learn from me. You came to this world to master the discipline of Pshat. In your last Gilgal, you learned Soid. You don't need to learn Soid in this Gilgal. You already did that last time around. This time around, you only need to learn Pshat. And here's the proof. The proof is that you'll see if you come to my shir, you're going to fall asleep immediately. And I have people like that by my shiurim, that not only do they fall asleep when I start? I had somebody who, as I was going up to the podium to speak, they were already sleeping. And I turned to them, I said, how could you do such a thing? And they said, Rabbi, I trust you. Okay, so anyway, it's because in the last Gilgul they heard the shiurim. So this Gilgul, they have other things to work on. Anyway, the Reb Chaim Vital was given a specific program from the Arizal to reach high madregos. And I'm going to share with you what that program is. It's brought in the Pri Eitz Chaim. It's brought in the Shar HaGilgulim. And the program is like this. The Arizal told Reb Chaim Vital to be careful to the greatest possible extent not to get angry, not to be makbid, not to be sad, not to be arrogant, not to speak rechilos, not to have leitzanos, not to speak lashon hara, not to have idle conversation, not to embarrass anyone, not to kill any living creature. And that Reb Chaim Vital should act with shiflos, simcha, shtika, yiras chet, that every day he should learn chumash, mishnah, Gemara, Kabbalah, and his ikar learning should be the Zohar. So Reb Chaim Vital is progressing. The only thing is, as he's learning, everything he learns he forgets. And the Arizal would encourage Reb Chaim Vital. The Arizal would say, Reb Chaim, your soul is on such a high madrega, even greater than Tanoim. And Reb Chaim Vital said, Rebbe, what are you talking about? Sometimes you tell me that I'm on a very, very low level. And other times you tell me my neshama is on a higher level even than the Tanoim. So Arizal said, Reb Chaim, you should know that the way Hashem judges a person is not objectively, but subjectively. Relative to the generation that you're in. You know, in Sfas, in the 1500s, the Koyach HaTumah was out of control. You can imagine all the, you know, what the media in Sfas was like in the 1500s, and all the billboards in Sfas in the 1500s. So the Tumah was out of control, the Arizal said. Therefore, relative to your generation, you are considered even greater than the Tanoim. Just if we digress for a moment, if the Arizal told Reb Chaim Vital that relative to his times, because of the great Koyach HaTumah, his esteem in Shamayim was so great, imagine how great our esteem is in Shamayim. Because if in Reb Chaim Vital's times, it was considered like the Koyach HaTumah was rampant, what would the Arizal say about the Koyach HaTumah today? In any event, Reb Chaim Vital was progressing, but he could not remember anything he was learning. So it's reported in the Sefer. I want to tell you exactly where. It's brought in the Shivchei Ha'ari, and it is also in the Pri Eitz Chaim that the Arizal said, come with me, get onto this little raft. And they went out opposite the old shul, where there were a lot of date palms. And then they went out to the Kinneret, somewhere over there. Now I can't tell you, I can't be Megala exactly where, although somebody just came to me last night and he told me that there's a sefer from a Makobal. It's called Machon Maggid, not to be confused with Maggid Mesharim, that he knows exactly where it is. But it's beyond the scope of this boat ride. Okay, we came too late. If we would have had more time on the boat, maybe we could have been Megala where exactly. So the Arizal took Reb Chaim Vital out to the Kinneret, and he scooped up a cup. He said, drink it. I'm giving you to drink from the Be'era Shel Miriam. And he drank it, and his memory was enhanced, and that was the beginning of the great ascent of Reb Chaim Vital. Now, Be'era Shel Miriam? How did the Be'er Shel Miriam get into the Yam Kinneres? How did that happen? So a few things to know about the Yam Kinneres, and then I'm going to tell you a chiddush of the Radzina Rebbe, and we'll end off with a great mystery. In Parshas Behaloischa, Miriam spoke Lashon Hara about Moshe Rabbeinu. Do you remember what the Lashon Hara was? Miriam said to Aaron, my brother, who does he think he is? He separated from his wife? Avram Avinu didn't have to separate from from Sarah. Yitzchak didn't have to separate from Rivka. Who does Moshe think he is that he separated from Tzipora? And all of a sudden, what happened? The Rebbeinu Shalom comes to Aaron and Miriam, and they cry out, Mayim, Mayim! Mayim, Mayim? Meaning Hashem was showing that Moshe Rabbeinu needed to be on call 24/7, so he had to be Pirish from Tzipora, because he always had to be in a state of purity. And Hashem suddenly, Hashem suddenly appeared to Miriam, so she cried out, Mayim, Mayim! What do you mean Mayim, Mayim? If somebody needs a mikvah, you call out Mayim, Mayim, what's the mikvah supposed to do? The mikvah is going to come to you? Why would you call for water? So Rav Nosson Gestetner says, what mikvah did Klal Yisrael use in the Midbar? They had a mikvah, where they had the Satmar mikvah in the Midbar. The mikvah they used in the Midbar was Be'era Shel Miriam. The Gemara in Shabbos says, Be'era Shel Miriam was a Mayon HaMisgalgel. It was a movable mikvah. It was a transporting mikvah. So therefore Miriam called out, Mayim, Mayim! Bring the mikvah, let the mikvah. So we see Be'er Shel Miriam, it moved. It moved. So maybe it went to the Yam Kineres. It must have gone there. If the Arizal took Reb Chaim Vital out to the Yam Kineres, and the Ari gave Reb Chaim Vital to drink from Be'er Shel Miriam. But I'll share with you something interesting. There's a very big contradiction in Chazal. Where is the Chilazon found? Is the Chilazon found in the Yam Kineres? Or is it, I believe the Zohar HaKadosh says, the Chilazon is found in the Yam Kineres. However, in the Medrash and in the Gemara, it says the Chilazon is the Yam HaTichon in the Mediterranean Sea. So, where is it? So the question is the Chilazon, what kind of animal is it? What kind of creature is it? What kind of water is conducive for the Chilazon? So the Radziner Rebbe, in his journeys to try to discover what he thought was the Chilazon, he came up with the following theory. He says that originally the Be'era Shel Miriam was in the Kineres. When the Beis HaMikdash stood, it was in the Kinneret. When it was in the Kinneret, then the Kinneret was conducive for the Chilazon. And the Chilazon lived in the Yam Kinneret, and that's why the Zohar, which was written during that time, says the Chilazon is found in the Yam Kinneret. But the same way Chazal say, Nadidu halachu, Nadidu halachu, all the animals migrated out of Eretz Yisrael in the times of the Churban. So if the animals left, then maybe the Chilazon left. Where did the Chilazon go? The Chilazon went to the Yam HaTichon. How could the Chilazon live in salt water? So the Radziner Rebbe says because the Be'era Shel Miriam also migrated out of the Yam Kinneret and it went to the Yam HaTichon. And it used to be, when the Beis HaMikdash stood, the Yam Kinneret was conducive for the Chilazon. But in the times of the Golos, the Yam HaTichon is conducive for the Chilazon. Why? Because the Be'era Shel Miriam left the Yam Kinneres and it came to the Yam HaTichon. That's the theory of the Radziner Rebbe. It's a very interesting theory. By the way, I mentioned the Mekubal who says he knows where the Be'er Shel Miriam is. This same Mekubal, he wrote this Sefer, Machon Maggid. He happens to have a very interesting revelation that he wrote in the year 1947. Okay, he wrote this before it happened. He says, does anybody know for how many years was Eretz Yisrael desolate, even from animals in the times of the Churban? 52 years. But wasn't it supposed to be 70 years? So what happened to those 18 years? So this Mekubal wrote in 1947, and by the way, this Mekubal has many discoveries of Mekaymes HaKadoshim in Eretz Yisrael. He said the 18 missing years of Churban were fulfilled from 1948 to 1967, where Klal Yisrael were not able to go to the Kaisel HaMaravi. Now, if he would have wrote that in 1967, I would have called that creative. He wrote that in Tafshin Zayin, that after the War of Independence, the Jewish people won't be able to go to the Kaisal Maravi, and those 18 years will be mashlim, the 52 years of Nadadu Halacha. In any event, this theory of the Razina Rebbe does not seem to fit with the story of the Ari and Reb Chaim Vital. Because Ari and Reb Chaim Vital, they lived when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And according to the Razina Rebbe, the Be'er Shel Miriam, which is Mayin HaMesgagal, left the Yam Kinneret and went to the Yam HaTichain. So where exactly was the Ari taking? Unless it means, it mostly left, but the Arizal was able to identify a small little bubbling. When you're riding on the Kinneret, you never know where you might get the Be'er Shel Miriam. The Kolbai, I believe the Beis Yosef quotes a Kolbai, that there was a particular individual who had a terrible skin irritation, and he asked his wife to get him a certain drink, and the wife was a little bit late, and she comes with the drink, and he got furious at her, and he spilled the whole drink, and a little bit of the water hit him on the foot, and where it hit him on the foot, it cured his irritation, but his skin irritation remained for good because he got angry, because it turned out she was late, but she discovered the Be'er Shel Miriam. So we see, even in our time, you could access the Be'er Shel Miriam. I believe the Shulchan Aruch says there's certain times at the end of Shabbos where either you do or you don't drink water based on times of the week where Be'er Shel Miriam is accessible. So I don't know if it helps to ride over it. I'm sure good things happen when you ride over the Be'er Shel Miriam. But we're somewhere in the vicinity, at least in the times of the Ari and Reb Chaim Vital, we're riding on the Yam Kinneret. Its waters are very sweet, and somewhere in this general area are some remnant of Be'er Shel Miriam. Okay, everyone, enjoy the rest of your boat ride. Bracha v'atzlacha, and later on tonight, we'll go to the kever of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes, which, by the way, is one of the landmarks to find Be'er Shel Miriam. You go directly opposite the Dekalim that are in front of the kever of Meir Baal HaNes. Somewhere in that area, you could find Be'er Shel Miriam. Shkayach. Okay, everyone, we're headed to the great location of the kever of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. Actually, we have some gifts to give to Rabbi Meir. We have a few Sfarim that are available. Recently, we translated the Sefer on Rabbi Meir into Spanish. So I want to thank the Mishpachas Behar, who's here with us, for putting it out, L'zecha Nishmas, their mother, who passed away recently. It should be, thank you, my dear friend, Mr. and Mrs. Michael Behar, put it out in honor of their mother's Petira, and we hope that this Sefer brings an aliyah to her neshama, and we hope it brings nachas ruach to the Tana Liki Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is known as Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes, the master of miracles. The question is, where does this name come from? The Tana of Meir in Shas is found numerous times. Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, which, by the way, Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, it's hard to understand. What does that mean, Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir? The Gemara tells us in Eruvin that we never rule like Rabbi Meir. We never paskin like Rabbi Meir, because Lo Yardu Chachamim L'Seif Datai. The Chachamim could not plumb the depth of his understanding. And yet we say Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir. So that some explanation is in order. Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir means that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, when he redacted the Mishnah, he took a much larger corpus of material and he condensed it. However, he wanted to use the original terminology from the earliest of Tanoim. Early Tanoim each had their own personal version of the wording of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So for the most part, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi took the language of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir's edition of Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's what it means, Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir. It doesn't mean the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. It means we used his edition of Torah Sheba'al Peh. But where does this expression Baal Hanes come from? There's a very remarkable sefer of a Makubal who lived in Teveria. The name of the sefer is Emes Liakov. Not to be confused, actually Rabbi Kamenetsky, I don't know, is Rabbi Kamenetsky here? One of the great grandchildren of Yaakov Kamenetsky came to me once. He said, really, where does my Zayda say this? So I told him, it's not that Emes Liakov, it's a different Emes Liakov. Actually, the first Emes Liakov, I'm sure there were many, but one of the earlier ones was Rabbi Yaakov Sha'alti al Ninyo. He was a Makubal who lived in Teveria. The Ben Yehoyada quotes him many times. And he writes extensively on the Rabbi Meir, and he says, since Rabbi Meir is always a Meilatz Yosher for Klal Yisrael, he always is our advocate, he's always our defendant, therefore through him, he's able to perform miracles for Klal Yisrael. And the question is, where do we ever see Rabbi Meir defending us? What kind of defense does the Rabbi Meir offer the Jewish people? In what way is he our advocate? By the way, it's a very great value to try to be a Meilatz Yosher for Klal Yisrael. It's a very great value to try to be an advocate for the Jewish people. In a way, it's the greatest zechus. The Ben Ish Chai writes in a few places that as great as a mitzvah of Talmud Torah is, there's one zechus in this world greater than Talmud Torah, and that is defending the Jewish people. He says it's even greater than Talmud Torah. He reads, "B'makoim sheba'alei teshuva oimdim ein tzadikim gemurim lamed," as follows. You have people who are tzadikim gemurim. They learn Torah. They serve Hashem all day. But a Baal Teshuvah means they argue with Hashem, and they say, "Ribono shel Olam, Klal Yisrael has this redeeming quality, and have rachmanus on them for this reason. And if they sin, it's not their fault. It's because of the length of the galus." That's a Baal Teshuvah, the masters of those who argue with the Ribono shel Olam. If anybody has ever heard, recently they came out with a lot of clips, recordings of the Kloisenberger Rebbe, who would spontaneously break out in the middle of davening, or even in the middle of Kriyas HaMegillah, with different Melitze Yesharim, different advocacies or defenses for the Jewish people. So it's a great value. In fact, the case could be made, it's the greatest zechus to defend Klal Yisrael. So therefore, we could explain, there is no great tzaddik or Talmud Chacham who has defended the Jewish people more than Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir taught Ben kach u ben kach nikram banim, that we're always the beloved children of Hashem. So no matter how far we may fall, no matter how greatly we may slide, no matter how distant we are from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our greatest advocacy is Soif Kol Soif, Ben Kach U Ben Kach, Nikra Banim. We're always the beloved children of Hashem, and like the Gemara in Kedushin says, not only we're the beloved children of Hashem when we stumble, we're even the beloved children of Hashem if we have no emunah, or if we're Oved Avodah Zarah. And not only are we called the children of Hashem, the Gemara says we're called Bani Ma'aliyah, we're called good children. That's the greatest advocacy we could possibly have. And therefore, Rabbi Meir is the Baal Hanes, because he's the master of the greatest zechus, and that is the defense of the Jewish people, Ben Kach U Ben Kach Nikra Banim. So we hope that in this makom, all of our tefillah should be niskabel, and we shall be zoicha, that Hashem should be merachim on all of us and all of Klal Yisrael, kerachim of Albanim. Okay, welcome everyone, Bruchim Abam. This is one of the greatest places in the whole world, the city of Teveria, the kever of Meir Baal Hanes. I see my dear friend Rabbi Moshe Weiss, who actually helped me with one of the Svarim, the Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes in English. And he was so makusher to Meir Baal Hanes, he moved from New York to live in Teveria. So Tavei Olav Bracha, he should be zoicha to see the Hisgalus of Mashiach Tzedkenu from the Asar Rishonim, Bez Hashem. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Rosh Hashanah that the Sanhedrin was exiled to 10 Golios at the time of the Churban. Am Rabbi Yehuda, Bar Idi, Am Rabbi Yochanan, The Shechina came along with the Sanhedrin. The Shechina, corresponding to the Sanhedrin, was exiled from the Lishkas Hagozis to an area called Chanus, and then to Yerushalayim, and then to Yavne, and then to Usha, and then to Yavne, and then back to Usha, and then Shepharam, and then to Beisharim, and to Tzipori, and then Teveria. And the Gemara says, Teveria amuka mikulan, amar Rabbi Yochanan, umisham asidan ligoel. Klal Yisrael will be redeemed from Teveria, which is very interesting. Klal Yisrael will be redeemed from Teveria. The Zohar HaKadosh says, in Chelek Beis, that the Mashiach will be revealed in the Galil. But the Gemara says from Teveria. So comes the Chidah, and the Chidah says there's no contradiction between the Zohar and the Gemara. The Zohar is giving us the general location. The general location is the Galil. The Gemara is giving us the specific location. Specifically, Mashiach will be revealed in this great city, in the city of Teveria. Why? Why? One of the great Mekubalim who lived in Teveria, Rabbi Yaakov Shalti al Ninyo, he asks in the Sefer Emes Liyaakov, what is so significant about Teveria, that Mashiach will reveal itself in Teveria? For those who have been listening to the shiurim on Rabbi Meir over the years, perhaps you're familiar with this approach of Rabbi Yaakov Shalti al Ninyo, but I want to share with you a new idea. L'kavod, being here in Eretz Yisrael at the kever of Rabbi Meir, Tavshin Peivav. The Gemara Masechta Avodah Zarah says Rabbi Meir had a special tefillah that he would frequently say. Rabbi Meir would say, Elaka de Meir anini. May the God of Meir answer me. Elaka de Meir anini. So the Marsha famously asks, how could Rabbi Meir say, let the God of Meir answer me? There's a concept that Hashem does not associate His name with the tzaddikim so long as they're alive. And the reason is very simple. Because so long as a person is alive, they still have bechira chavshas, they have free choice. And if they have free choice, they could veer off. So how could Hashem commit Himself? How could Hashem decide and attach His name to tzaddikim while they're alive? But there's no guarantee they'll remain tzaddikim. And the greatest proof is Yochanan Kohen Gadol, who was Meshamesh Bekuna Gedola for 80 years, and then he veered off. So Hashem never said Elokei Yitzchak when Yitzchak was alive. What did the Rebbeinu Shalom say when Yitzchak was alive? Pachad Yitzchak. But the Rebbeinu Shalom would never say Elokei Yitzchak. So how could Rabbi Meir say Elokah de Meir Aneni? So L'kavod being here, Tavshin Peivav, I want to share with you a new chidush. The Marsha, it's well known, the Marsha answers that when Rabbi Meir said the tefillah Elokah de Meir Aneni, he didn't mean the God of Meir. He wasn't referring to himself. He didn't mean the Rebbeinu Shalom of Meir. He meant either Elokah, the God, de Meir la'aretz v'ladorim aleha barachamim. He was referring to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Elokah, de Meir la'aretz, the God who illuminates the world. Or he was referring to the miracle of Chanukah, Elokah, de Meir einenu in the times of Chanukah. But I would like to share with you a new approach to this question. The minhag in Klal Yisrael, and it's brought in the Medrash Talpios of Rav Eliyahu HaKohen of Izmir. He says that minhag Yisrael is if you lose something, you lose your keys, you lose your toothbrush, you can't find something. So what do? You give tzedakah le'ilui nishmas Meir balanes. You say Elokah de Meir aneni, and in the zchus Meir you'll find your lost object. So the question is, because what does Rabbi Meir got to do with your lost object? Because you lost your car keys? Why do you bring Rabbi Meir into it? What does Rabbi Meir have to do with your car keys? Would you invoke Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Tarfon? Or if you lost your keys, you would say, Rabbi Tarfon, help me out. Rabbi Tarfon might not be interested in your car keys. So why is Rabbi Meir involved over here? What does Rabbi Meir have to do with your lost object? So we've said over many times that this physical world reflects the spiritual world. Rabbi Meir's famous shita, his worldview, Rabbi Meir holds, Ben kach u ben kach mikram banim. We're always considered the beloved children of Hashem. Which means that in the spiritual world, nobody's lost. No matter how far you fall, no matter how distant you are from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're always connected, you could always come back. We explained Rabbi Meir is choishesh for the miyot. Even if there's a small attachment, even if there's a small possibility, it's still redeemable. You never know. So in the world of Rabbi Meir, no one is ever spiritually lost. So if nobody's spiritually lost, nothing is ever physically lost. So in Rabbi Meir's viewpoint, your car keys are somewhere. Your toothbrush, you're going to find it, even if you think it's unlikely, even if you think it's impossible. In the world of Rabbi Meir, nothing is ever lost. In other words, Rabbi Meir l'shitase, the physical world reflects the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, it's ben kach u'ben kach nikram banim. You're always the beloved children of Hashem. So in the physical world, nothing is ever lost. So here's the idea. Rabbi Meir's great viewpoint, and by the way, we spoke out many times, there's a great discussion because the Gemara in Eruvin says that we never paskin like Rabbi Meir. We don't understand him. But the one exception to the rule, the Tshuvas Harashba teaches, is this machlokes that we're always the beloved children of Hashem. It's well known, the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Lamed Vav. Rabbi Yehuda says, what's our relationship to Hashem? Rabbi Yehuda says it depends. If we behave, then we're Hashem's beloved children. If we don't behave, then we're His avadim. I always say, I would personally like to implement that approach to my children. Let's say, so I brought my kids on the trip. People want to know, who are these kids? So it depends on the minute. When they behave, I could say, they're barim chavivim. And if they don't behave, I could say, I don't know, their mother asked me to watch them for the day. That's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Rabbi Yehuda holds that our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is conditional. But Rabbi Meir holds no, ben kach u'ben kach nikram banim. Now you would expect the halacha should be like Rabbi Yehuda. Machlokes Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. But the Tshuvas Harashba says the one exception to the rule of where we paskin like Rabbi Meir is that we're always the beloved children of Hashem. Why? So the Rashba says, because Rabbi Meir brings 4 psukim that supports his view. The Emes Yaakov, hopefully tomorrow, Rabbi Moshe will find where the Emes Yaakov is buried. Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo. Hopefully we'll find that, I think we know where his wife is buried. So I think he's right next to her. He says that since the Gemara shakal v'tari, in the words of Rabbi Meir, the Gemara handles Rabbi Meir shita, and the Gemara is discussing Rabbi Meir, that proves that we paskin like Rabbi Meir. There are many other proofs we paskin like Rabbi Meir. Others say, there's a sefer written on Rabbeinu Maimon, the father of the Rambam, who points out usually Rabbi Meir is the first Tana listed in a Mishnah, Teveria, the Tanakama. When it comes to this machlokes, Rabbi Meir is listed last. Why? Because he has the last word. We paskin like Rabbi Meir. The Satmar Rebbe famously says that the reason we paskin like Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo also, he's the earlier source, that what's the reason we don't typically paskin like Rabbi Meir? Because lo yardu chachamim l'soif daita. The chachamim can't understand the depth of the wisdom of Rabbi Meir. But when it comes to this machlokes, this is not relevant only to man. This is relevant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu surely is yared l'soif daita shel Rabbi Meir. So therefore when it comes to this machlokes, of course we paskin like Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Vadi Yosef says another reason we paskin like Rabbi Meir is because Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Meir. Who is the Bala Memra Perkei Avos? Chavivim Yisrael Shenikru Banim Lamakoim. Rabbi Akiva. Now it's of note that in Teveria is buried Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Akiva, because the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says the Geula will be revealed here in Teveria. Why will the Geula be revealed here in Teveria? So Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo says, because for the Geula to come, the nations of the world are going to argue. You're redeeming these people. Halalu oivdei avodah zarah, halalu oivdei avodah zarah. They're not better than us. The only argument HaKadosh Baruch Hu could give, what's the winning argument? The only argument is, ben kachu, ben kach nikra banim. So says Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo, but the Goyim are going to claim, we go like Rabbi Yehuda, we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. So we're going to turn to them and say, no, the Tshuvas Harashba, the Rashba says this is the one exception to the rule. No, the Goyim are going to say, we're muchsuk on Klal Yisrael in the Golos. When you're a muchsuk, you could say kimli. We hold like Rabbi Yehuda. But the halacha will always be like the Mara da Asra. We always paskin like the rabbi of the location. So where can Mashiach come and the nations of the world cannot claim that we're not always the beloved children of Hashem? In which city is the halacha always going to be ben kachu ben kach nikram banim, Here in Teveria, Rabbi Meir, he's the rabbi of the city, he's the Mar Asra over here. And if you don't agree he's the Mar Asra, well, we have Rabbi Akiva up the hill. He's also the Mar Asra. Halacha Rabbi Akiva mechaverav. This year we discovered twice in Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber and the Ramah paskin like Rabbi Meir halacha l'maisa. Once in, you see, you thought this was a receipt for the boat ride. No. The Ramah and Siman Kuf Nun Tes in Yeridea paskins, are you allowed to lend money to a mumar with ribis? A mumar, he's a mumar. He's not b'chal misecha. You should be able to lend him beribis. Says the Mechaber, yesh machmirin. Says the Bir Agra, why yesh machmirin? Ayin kedushin lamed vav min aleph, ben kach and Quran banum, chuvas harajba siman kuf tzali daled reish mem beis. So the Bir Agra says the Mechaber paskins like Rabbi Meir. Weiter in Yeridea, in Hilchos Tuma, Kivrei Akum, are they matame? They're matame maga. Maybe they're not matame oyel. What about a kever of a mumar? Says Rama, yesh machmirin. Says the Gra. Why? Ben kach mikran banim chuvas harajba. So both the Mechaber and the Rama paskin like the chuvas harajba. So here in Teveria, the halach is nikva ben kach mikran banim. Here is where Mashiach will reveal himself. Therefore, Rabbi Meir writes in the Yushalmi, Rabbi Meir says, I am Mashiach. Now, one second. Rabbi Meir could do a lot of things. One thing he can't be is he can't be Mashiach. To be Mashiach, you have to come from David HaMelech. Rabbi Meir is a descendant of Nero Kezar. He's a descendant of Esav. He can't be Mashiach. What he means, says the Emes Yaakov, is that through his Shita, he could facilitate the coming of Mashiach. Without Rabbi Meir, how could the Mashiach come? Now, there's no other person in the world who could ever say, this is the Chiddush. Elakad Avram Anini, Elakad Yitzchak Anini, Elakad Yaakov Anini. Because in general the rule is, you can't trust in yourself. You may veer off, you may disconnect, you may pull away. But if there's anyone in this world who, in their worldview, the relationship is immutable, and it can never change, and is a constant, and will never be severed, it's Rabbi Meir. In the world of Rabbi Meir, no matter what happens, you're always the beloved child of Hashem. Rabbi Meir is the only one who could say, Elokah de Meir ani. But what do you mean? You never know what could happen. No. Rabbi Meir says, nothing could happen. I'm not worried. We're not worried. In the worldview of Rabbi Meir, there is one guarantee. There's one, in this world, there's taxes, there's certain constants. But there's one other constant in the world of Rabbi Meir, and that is ben kach uben kach nikram banim. That's a constant. So if there's any makom in the world that you could daven, that no matter what madrega someone is on, they're still redeemable, they still have an immutable connection to Hashem. Hashem's ahava for them is eternal and unchanging and unwavering. It's right over here. The Ben Yoyada brings that there's only one Tana in the world who's buried standing up, and that's Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. And the reason he's buried standing up is because his zechus stands for the Jewish people forever and ever until the great day of the coming of Mashiach. And if you look on the wall over there, there's a statement of Reb Chaim Falaji. Reb Chaim Falaji says that we should never be Meseach Das from Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. We should never be Meseach Das. It's interesting. Why should we never be Meseach Das from Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes? Because the same way we can never be Meseach Das for being Mitzapeh Yeshua, part of being Mitzapeh Yeshua is to recognize and appreciate the great value of Rabbi Meir, Ben Kach u'Ben Kach Nikram Banim. So we have a very esteemed Olam tonight who came to be mispalel u'mischanein by the Tana Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. May all of our tefillos be neskabel barachamim u'vratzain. Shkayach. Good morning. We're headed to the city of Teveria. Teveria is specifically connected with a particular mitzvah. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Amar Rabbi Yosi, Hei chalki mi machnise, Shabbos b'Teveria. If only I would be among those who bring in the Shabbos in Teveria. Why would he want to be among those who bring in the Shabbos in Teveria? Rashi explains simply. Teveria is very low-lying, and Shabbos comes in earlier. So Rabbi Yossi says, I would like to be among those who greet the Shabbos in Teveria, to be among those who greet Shabbos early. Question is, why did he pick Teveria? Teveria is not the lowest lying land. He should have said, Mimachnise Shabbos be Yam HaMelach. Yam HaMelach is certainly lower. So obviously we see there's a particular connection between the day of Shabbos and Teveria, and the connection is very clear. The Chida writes in all of his Svarim that in order to keep Shabbos, you have to have the following status. You have to be Banim Lamakoim. Why? Goy Shavas is Chayv Misa. A Gentile who keeps Shabbos is liable to the death penalty, because Shabbos is Sharvitoy Shamakoim. Shabbos is the scepter of the king. An ordinary person can't observe Shabbos. Only the son of the king could observe Shabbos. Nobody could lift up the scepter of the king. If you lift up the scepter of the king, you're married b'malchus. Only the child of the king could lift up his scepter. So Shabbos demonstrates we're banim lamakom. Teveria is the city where it's established that we're banim lamakom. Teveria is the city of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is the Marad Asra of Teveria. So the city of Teveria is inextricably bound with Shabbos. Shabbos is the very fabric of the city of Teveria. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi says, "Yehei chelki mimachnise Shabbos b'Teveria." The Gemara Megillah says it's called Teveria because it's tabur haaretz. It's the umbilical cord of the world. Why is Teveria the umbilical cord? It's the city that establishes our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as banim lamakoim. It's literally the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord connects the parent to the child. Teveria connects Avinu Shebashamayim to Banim Atem L'Hashem Lekechem. Have a great day, everyone. Good morning, everyone. So, many people have asked, where are we going now? And that's a question we always have to ask in life. Ula'an ata hoylech, and where are you going? That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to give you an answer. You want an answer? The Mishnah only gives you the question, Ula'an ata hoylech. So it's a very chashuv thing that everyone's asking, Ula'an ata hoylech, where are we going? So I'm going to let you sit on that question, since it's such an important question in life, to know in general, where are you going? But maybe I'll give you a few hints and a few clues. There was once a great rabbi who was giving a shiur. This rabbi's name was Rabbi Akiva. And his Talmidim were falling asleep. And I always think the more things change, the more they stay the same. That's the age-old problem. The rabbi gets up to speak and the Talmidim fall asleep. So Rabbi Akiva wanted to wake them up. So he said, why was Esther Zoicha to rule over 127 Medinos in the merit of her righteous ancestress Sarah Imenu, who lived 127 righteous years? Wow, that's so exciting, that's so interesting. Everyone jumped up. I don't know about you, but if I was tired and the Rebbe began the shiur, why was Esther... is that really so interesting? What is so interesting about that? How in the world did that wake up the Talmidim? This cheshbon of the 127 and 127, that was Rabbi Akiva's best arsenal? So the Chidush HaRim says like this. Chidush HaRim says, let's make one simple calculation. You could come through. It's good for business. Let's make one simple calculation. If in the merit of 127 righteous years, Esther was Zoicha to rule over 127 Medinos, that means every year merited Esther a country. That means probably in the merit of every month she was Zoicha to a province, which means in the merit of every day she was Zoicha to a state, which means in the merit of every hour she was Zoicha to a city, which means in the merit of every minute she was Zoicha to a whole neighborhood, and the merit of every second she was Zoicha to a whole community. Look what you could do in one moment. Look how valuable one moment is. Dear Talmidim, if you fall asleep now and you lose out even one moment of learning, you could lose out on eternal good. Rabbi Akiva was alerting them to Yakiras Hazman, the value of time, how precious every moment of life is. That's how Rabbi Akiva woke them up. He didn't wake them up with humor. He didn't wake them up with something interesting. He gave them pointed musar. Take advantage of every single moment. We can ask a question, why is it Rabbi Akiva, who teaches his students and Klal Yisrael the value of time, why specifically Rabbi Akiva? And the answer is, this is one of Rabbi Akiva's great keys for success. Because the Ben Yehoyada teaches that the Rashi Teva is, so the word Akiva, is Yesh, Koina, Oilamai, Bisha, Achas. Rabbi Akiva's name stands for you could acquire Olam Haba in one moment. So you'll ask, that's only if you spell Akiva with an Aleph. But what if you spell Akiva with a Hey? Says Ben Yehoyada, Yesh, Koina, Oilamai, Bisha, Ha'achas. You could acquire your Olam Haba in one moment. Now, as you know, there is a famous machlokes how you spell Akiva. There was once a man by the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Mivina, Rabbi Yitzchak Avin, the Arzarua, and the reason he named his sefer Arzarua is because he was writing a sefer on Shemois Begittin, how you spell various names in documents of divorce, and he came to the name Akiva and he didn't know, do you spell it Ayin Kuf Yud Beis Aleph or Ayin Kuf Yud Beis Hey? And he had a dream, and in his dream they showed him the pasuk, Ahoyer Zarua La Tzadik Ole Yishrei Lehev Simcha, and he was wondering, why did he dream Arzar La Tzadik Ole Yishrei Lehev Simcha? And then he realized it's Soifei Tevois, Rabbi Akiva with a hey. So he therefore paskined you spell Akiva with a hey. However, we don't paskin that way. We paskin you spell Akiva with a Aleph. Some say, the Chassam Sofer brings, that originally his name was spelled with a hey. V'yatzisa nishmasai be'echad, when his soul left, then the Aleph of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was appendage to his name, and now we spell his name Akiva with an Aleph. But in any event, the name of Akiva stands for Yesh, Kaina, Oilamai, Bisha, Achas, or Ha'achas. How do you think Rabbi Akiva propelled himself, catapulted himself to such greatness? He got a late start. He started off at 40. How did he make up for lost time? The answer is, he never lost a moment. Like the Chida writes in his Sefer Avodas HaKodesh, and Ois Kuf Nun Gimel, memorize this. Ois Kuf Nun Gimel. Chida says, Umi she'enoi ma'abedas hazman yesh zman lakoil. If you don't waste time, there's time for everything. Rabbi Akiva took advantage of every moment of life. And therefore, he's the one who teaches the world the value of time. That's how he woke up his Talmidim, and this is the great legacy of the great Tana, Rabbi Akiva. Now, somebody wanted to know, which bus is better? Which bus gets more Divrei Torah? The answer is the bus that you're on. Now, just continuing right along on that theme, talking a little bit more about Rabbi Akiva. It's interesting, we went last night to Teveria, to Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir's famous shita is Banim Atem Lashem Alekeichem. Where did Rabbi Meir get that from? You know, if you look in Perkei Avos, who said Chavivin Yisrael Shenikru Banim Lamakoim? Rabbi Akiva. If you look in Avos to Rav Nasan, now Avos to Rav Nasan is not necessarily related to Nasan Wadler. Just pointing that out. Okay? It's the Tana Rav Nasan. But in Avos to Rav Nasan, the Tana who says Chavivin Yisrael Shenikru Banim Lamakoim is Rabbi Meir. The Mefarshim say Rabbi Meir was a student of Rabbi Akiva. By the way, all of Torah Shabal Peh, all of Torah Shabal Peh boils down to Rabbi Akiva. You know, it's interesting, if you look in the Keser Rosh of the Vilna Gaon, he says a segula for Hasmada is learning Mishnayos. And the reason is, you know why it's a segula for Hasmada? Because when you learn Gemara, sometimes you'll have a minute here or a minute there. You'll say, how much Gemara could I learn? But if you learn Mishnah, then you realize, you know what, even if I have 1 minute, I could learn a Mishnah, I could learn 2 Mishnayos. Mishnayos are a segula for Hasmada. All of Mishnah comes from Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Akiva was Rabbi Meir's Rebbe. And Rabbi Akiva had 5 primary Talmidim. Who knows who his Talmidim were? The Gemara says he taught Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar. These were the 5 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva's great value and teaching was that we're always the beloved children of Hashem. That's why, do you remember the famous conversation between Rabbi Akiva and Tornus Rufus? The Tornus Rufus says to Rabbi Akiva, "Hey Rabbi Akiva, does God love the poor?" Rabbi Akiva says, "Yeah, Hashem loves the poor." So Tornus Rufus says, "So why doesn't he feed them?" So Rabbi Akiva says, "It's so that we should get Olam Haba." So Tornus Rufus says, "No, you're going to get Gehenna if you give tzedakah." What? Rabbi Akiva says, "Why would you get Gehenna if you give tzedakah?" So Tornus Rufus says, "The king decreed that this person shouldn't have money. Imagine if the king locks someone up in jail and someone sneaks in and feeds the person. They should be liable to the death penalty." Rabbi Akiva said, "Bad analogy." So Tornus Rufus says, what's the analogy? Rabbi Akiva says the analogy is, what if the king locked up his son and someone snuck in and fed the son? The king would reward the person. We're banim la'makam. Tornus Rufus says, "No, you're not. Not when you don't do the will of Hashem." And Rabbi Akiva says, "No, we're always banim la'makam." So Rabbi Akiva is the originator of Rabbi Meir's worldview of ben kach u'ben kach nikram banim. Rabbi Meir learned it from Rabbi Akiva. That's why Rabbi Ovadia Yosef says, one of the reasons we paskins like Rabbi Meir, that we're always the beloved children of Hashem, is because Rabbi Akiva, his Rebbe, paskins like him, and halacha ki Rabbi Akiva mechaveroi. In any event, even though the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, Chamishim sharei bina nivru ba'olam v'chula nitnu l'Moshe chasar achas shenemar v'atachasreu me'ad me'alokim. The Moshe Rabbeinu only had 49 levels of Chachma. There was one individual who reached the 50th level of Chachma. The pasuk says, "B'chol yakar ra'asa einai." Rabbi Akiva saw a kol. Rabbi Akiva was given the Sharnon. Kol is the Sharnon. Rabbi Akiva even knew the Sharnon. That's why the Gemara says in Menachos that when Moshe Rabbeinu saw in the Yeshiva Shamala that Rabbi Akiva was being doiresh, the koitzin of the oisiyos, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't understand, and he was not assuaged until Hashem allowed Moshe to hear halacha l'Moshe misinai. But Rabbi Akiva reached a sharnun, a level that even Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't zoicha to. Now, if I could share with you, the Megal HaMukos teaches Rabbi Akiva is alluded to in the Aleph of Vayikra. How so? What do we know about the Aleph of Vayikra? It's Aleph Ze'ira, small Aleph. The gematria of Aleph Ze'ira is Rabbi Akiva. The gematria of Aleph Ze'ira is Rabbi Akiva. So, with that introduction, we heading to the great epicenter, in a certain sense, of the highest level of Chachma that came down to this world. Kol Yakar Ra'asa Einai. Zchusa Yagin Alinu. Okay, if you think about where we're standing, opposite the Yam Kinneret, on this mountain, to realize you're in the presence of the Tana Elokei, Rabbi Akiva, the foundation of all the Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Ran writes that one of the advantages of Kivrei Tzadikim is that a tzaddik in his lifetime was like an antenna of Chachma Elokis, of divine wisdom, and even La'achar Misasai, his guf continues to be a medium of Shefa to this world. If we could say, in a certain sense, the greatest channel of Chachma Elokis that there ever was is right here in this place. The Tana Elokei Rabbi Akiva. Chazal tell us, Kol Yakar Ra'asa Einai, that was revealed to Rabbi Akiva wasn't even revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu. That to Rabbi Akiva was revealed even the Sharnun. All of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, Mishnah, Tosefta, Sifra, Sifri, Mechilta, Kulan, Aliba de Rabbi Akiva, Aliba de Rabbi Akiva. Not only according to Rabbi Akiva, it was on his heart. It was on his heart. When he saw the drops of water penetrating the rock, Rabbi Akiva made a kal v'chomer. He said if water could penetrate stone, certainly Torah could penetrate my heart. Which means that says Rav Moshe Shapiro, all of the Torah was on Aliba de Rabbi Akiva, it was on the heart of Rabbi Akiva. He was the greatest medium of Chachma Lekis that there ever was. Here we have on this Even, that with the time they took Rabbi Akiva out to be killed, it was Zman Kriya Shema. It was Zman Kriya Shema. So that's typically understood. You imagine it must have been sometime in the morning. But the Medrash says that it happened in the nighttime. And we know Rabbi Akiva was killed on Yom Kippur, which means the time of the murder of Rabbi Akiva was Leil Yom HaKippurim, which is one of the reasons why we begin Yom Kippur with a hidden hesped for the Tana Rabbi Akiva by saying Or Zarua La Tzadik Uli Yishrei Lev Simcha. We know on the day that a tzaddik passes away, it sears into the day the teachings of that tzaddik. Rabbi Akiva's great teaching was Ashreichem Yisrael Lifnei Mi Atem Mitarim Umi Mitaher Eschem Avichem Shabashamayim. That was the great teaching of Rabbi Akiva, which was seared into the day of Yom HaKippurim. But if you think about it, if all of Torah Sheba'al Peh is according to Rabbi Akiva, that means Yom Kippur is the day that the Torah Sheba'al Peh is Nimsar to Klal Yisrael. So not only were the Luchos Shniyos given to Klal Yisrael on Yom Kippur, but all of Torah Sheba'al Peh was given to Klal Yisrael on Yom HaKippurim, the day of the Betira of Kol Yakar Ra'asa Einai Mashanigla LeRabbi Akiva Le'nigla LeMoshe Rabbeinu. Rabbi Akiva is the originator of the concept of Banim Atem LaHashem Elokeichem. He's the one who says in Perkei Avos, Chavivin Yisrael Shenikru Banim LaMakayim. Here he is, opposite the Yam Kinneret, in the city of the Hiskalos, Be'ezus Hashem, of Mashiach Tzidkenu, and in the merit of the Tana Elokei, and in all of our tefillos, Hashem should be Matzmiach Keren Yeshua. Amen. Okay, we're here in Teveria, opposite the kever Rabbi Akiva. Obviously, it's significant that this matzeva for the Ramchal is right next to Rabbi Akiva, as the Ramchal passed away at 39 years old, and Rabbi Akiva got going at 40 years old. So there's considered a spiritual bond between the Ramchal and Rabbi Akiva, and it's worthwhile to note that the most well-known sefer written by the Ramchal, Sefer Mesilas Yesharim, begins with a very powerful statement. I'll tell you from personal experience. Very often I give a shir, and people, when I start talking, they start shaking their head as if to say, oh, I know that already, you once spoke about that. So my reaction is always, that person not only isn't listening the second time, they obviously didn't listen the first time. Do you understand what I'm saying? If somebody feels, oh, I know it already, not only are they not listening now, they never listened to begin with. Because that means in their mind, it's just like a general topic. Oh, you were talking about Torah? Yeah, I heard that already. Because Ein Beis HaMedrash B'li Chidush. It's all about refocus, acute awareness. That is the teaching of Mesilas Yesharim. Mesilas Yesharim says, "Hachibur hazeh lo chibartiv lelamed es bnei adam es asher lo yadu." I didn't even write the book to teach people something they don't know, but to remind them what they know already, because we all know everything. As Rabbi Sol Salanter would say, the greatest distance in this world is the distance between the head and the heart, which means we know everything. It's a matter of feeling it. So when somebody's speaking and you heard it already, so now you have an opportunity to integrate it, to think about it again, to see it from a different angle, to see it from a different facet, to move the information a little bit further down from the head to the heart. So the entire Mesilas Yesharim, think about it, which brings you to the level of Ruach HaKodesh, there's nothing new there. Which means all levels of Avodas Hashem are a matter of feeling it and not knowing it. And that's the premise and the foundation of Sefer Mesilas Yesharim. Okay, we're going to say here, Parak Kuf Chaf Aleph. Coast of the Kinneret, at a location I've been in Teveria many times, but I've never come to this place before, and it's really a historic location. Amazing privilege to be here. The Eitz Chaim Shul, the shul of Reb Chaim Abulafia. Reb Chaim was a Talmud of Rav Moshe Galante. He learned together with the Pri Chadash. He was the Rav of Tzfas, and then the Rav of Izmir, and as we're going to read on his kever, he was stirred min hashamayim at 80 years old in the 1740s to come to the city of Teveria and rebuild Teveria and to rebuild this shul. He was like a malach min hashamayim. He's the one who is responsible for rebuilding the city of Teveria. The Chida writes, and the Shem Hagdoilem, Rabu Noira Oisav, his wonders are great, v'inyanov, in his history, kedushasai ke'echad meharishonim k'meforsim, like one of the rishonim. Chida adds, his words are heard on high in the Sefer Arachayim. It's written that he had a tradition that he was from Shevet Yehuda and of royal lineage. Many great miracles happened in his time. About 2 years after he came to Teveria in 1742, a war broke out between the Sheikh Dahir al-Amar and the governor from Damascus, Saliman. The governor from Damascus was very jealous of the success of Dahir al-Amar and his success, and he came against Teveria with a big army. The governor of Damascus was positioned with a great army on the mountain opposite this area of Teveria, the place where Rabbi Kiva and his 24,000 students were buried, and he sieged Teveria for 85 days straight, sending missiles, projectiles, shooting at Teveria constantly. And they warned Reb Chaim Abulafia, and they said, this governor is coming, escape, save yourself. And the Reb Chaim Abulafia responded, what can I do? I jeopardized my life to come here and rebuild the city, and I put in so much effort to rebuild the city and to rebuild the shul, I can't forsake it. So Reb Chaim had a staff upon which was written various Shemos of Hashem, and he would wave with his staff, and he would guide the missiles so that they all fell into the sea. They didn't cause any harm in Teveria. 2 people were walking, the missiles, the stones went between their legs, between their shoulders. And when the Goyim saw that Hashem was fighting for the Jewish people, they abandoned their governor, who commanded them to destroy the city, and these Gentiles were not able to prevail, and all of the hundreds of missiles fell into the sea. So Reb Chaim strengthened the hearts of the residents of Teveria, and he promised them nothing bad would happen to them. Now, for many years, it's been retold the miracles of this Milchama. Even the great earthquake of Tzfas did not destroy anything in Teveria, and the residents did not leave the city. And after a long siege on the 4th of Kislev in 1743, the siege stopped, and Daled Kislev was established by Reb Chaim as a Yom Tif for all generations. A short while later, the governor of Damascus returned, and he came. It was a Friday night. Reb Chaim read the Haftarah, the Parshas Hashavua, Anoichi, hu menachemchem, mi'at vatiri meyanosh yamos. So Reb Chaim told his family, Al tiru, do not be afraid. This is the Siman. Hashem is promising us. Don't be afraid of man. Al tiri meyanosh yamos. And the next day he darshaned in the Beis Knesses like it was his normal practice, and his whole drasha was on the pasuk Ki Hashem Elokeichem Hu Hahoylech Imachem Al Tiri Meyenosh Yamos. This Gentile governor will not come to the city. And on Sunday, Hey Elul Maggid came and said the governor had an ailment, a stomach ailment, very seriously, and he lost his senses. And on the 4th day of the week, they came to tell him that the governor had already passed away yesterday on Tuesday. And the general began on their way to Akko and then back to Syria, and the people rejoiced greatly. And on that Shabbos, Rav Chaim Abulafia recounted the miracle. They said Hallel, like they did by the first miracle on Daled Kislev, and they proclaimed Zion Elul as a great Yom Tif. So this is the shul that Rav Chaim Abulafia rebuilt, and this was part of his reviving the city of Teveria. He also is the author of the Eitz Chaim ala Torah, Mikroi Kodesh on Pesach and Yom Tif, Yosef Lekach ala Torah, Yashresh Yaakov on the Ein Yaakov. He also wrote Shvus Yaakov on the Ein Yaakov. Zechusai Yagein Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, for his wondrous feats on behalf of the residents of Teveria and Klal Yisrael. Okay, welcome everyone to the ancient cemetery in Teveria. It's one of the most beautiful Batei Chaim in the whole world. You look in the background here, you see, beautiful mountains, lush mountains. This is the area of Peros Genosar, and this is where the Talmidei HaBaal Shem and the Talmidei HaGra are buried in this cemetery. Many of the original Talmidei Baal Shem and Talmidei HaGoyin are buried in this cemetery, including Reb Chaim Abulafia. Here, our first stop at the entrance is a more recent kever. This is the kever of the Mashgiach, Rav Moshe Wolfson. And I think it's worthwhile, we're here in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Wolfson wrote a classic sefer, a very beautiful sefer. It's called Sion Ve'areha, based on the premise that Eretz Yisrael is the land of Torah. And each city of Eretz Yisrael corresponds to a different miktsoya of Torah. And different cities are more conducive to appreciate and understand different realms of Torah. So we'll see tomorrow, we're going to be in Chevron. Chevron is Keneged Bris Milah. Yushalayim is Keneged Shabbos. And through this idea, which was innovated, by the way, by Reb Pinchas Karatzer and Reb David Ivshitz in the Arvei Nachal, and many, many other Sfarim, they bring this idea to explain that Chazal tell us that Kalev ben Yefuna says, whoever conquers the city of Beit Sefer, I'll give them my daughter Achsa. And the Gemara says, really it was referring to not the city of Beit Sefer, but the 3,000 halachas that were forgotten during the Avelos of Moshe Rabbeinu. So all the above mentioned Sfarim say that there's no contradiction between the Pasuk and Chazal. The Chazal are giving you the depth of the Pasuk. The reason they couldn't conquer Beit Sefer is because it corresponded to the Chelek of Torah of those 3,000 halachos. Based on this premise, Rav Wolfson composed an entire Sefer, going through each city in Eretz Yisrael and what part of Torah corresponds to. If you're allowed to be Moisef, Ktsas, famously, we'll say it again tomorrow by the Chesed Avram. The Chesed Avram, the great-great-grandfather Chida, says that there's no city in the world that is more conducive to understand the secrets of Torah than the city of Tzfas. And the Chassam Sofer famously challenges that in a tshuva. How could there be any advantage of any city in Eretz Yisrael over Yerushalayim? But based on this premise that there are particular cities of Eretz Yisrael that correspond to different chalakim in Torah, it's possible that the Torah that corresponds to the city of Tzfas are the Soidos HaTorah, and therefore in that area it's more conducive to understand the secrets of Torah. So it's really a beautiful sefer. I highly recommend you get your hands on the sefer Sion Ve'areha of Rav Moshe Wolfson, Mashgiach b'Mesivta Torah V'das, and he was the Rav in the Shul in the Kahal Emunas Yisrael, author of Svarim Emunas Yitecha. Ancient cemetery in Teveria, one of the great Kvarim here, one of the great Tzadikim, Rav Nachman Meir Danka, who was the Zayda of Rav Nachman of Breslov. Rav Nachman of Hardanka was the Zayda of Rav Nachman of Breslov. His kever is right next to Rav Yaakov Shimshon of Mishpetivka, and one matzeva, so to speak, marks both of them. His kedusha kinoirahu. Rav Pinchas of Karts would say that so long as Rav Nachman Hardanka was alive, the Russians were not able to invade. They were not able to invade Poland. They tried many times. So long as Rav Nachman was alive, they couldn't invade. The day he made Aliyah, the Russians invaded Poland. He was once traveling from Yafo to Akko, and suddenly there was a tremendous storm, and the boat was in danger of being capsized. And Rav Nachman Hardanka gathered together a bezdin of 10 people. He said if it was Nigzar min Hashamayim, from the bezdin Shalmala, that he should be drowned, he should be Neved min Oilam, I gather together an Eidah Kedosha, together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shechina, and I'm avatul the Gzeira, we're not maskim to the Gzeira min Hashamayim. They all answered Amen, and the storm stopped about 2 hours later. Why 2 hours? Processing time, Anyway, in 1765 he made Aliyah. The year he came up to Eretz Yisrael, to Teveria, he passed away. His Torah is recorded in Dega Machne Ephraim, and he is from the earliest Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, Zechusa Yagen Aleinu. Okay, we're here opposite the Yam Kineres in the ancient cemetery of Teveria. I'll tell you, for me personally, this is the reason that I wanted to come here this year. I spent a lot of time on this sefer. The name of the sefer is Emes LeYaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo. And he writes extensively about the city of Teveria. And I thought to myself, how come I was never at his kever? Where is he buried? So I sent around. My friend Rabbi Meir helped me locate, to the best of our knowledge, where in all probability Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo is buried. Right here, next to it, seems to be the kever of his wife, Moras Sarah Ninyo. She was nifter on the Yom Esrim Rosh Chodesh Sivan, Shnas Tafresh Membeis, 1882. And next to him, it's not marked, next to her is the kever of Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo. His sefer on Teveria is a seminal sefer. The Ben Ish Chai quotes it extensively. The basic idea we said over last night, let's say it here, Le'iloi, Nishmasai, Lezachusai, Lezachuseinu, that he has a phenomenal idea of what the significance of Rabbi Meir being buried in Teveria and Rabbi Akiva being buried in Teveria. The idea is based on the premise that in order for Mashiach to come, we're going to rely ultimately on the concept that we are always the beloved children of Hashem. And that's a debatable concept. We know Rabbi Yehuda challenges that concept. But Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo says that Rabbi Meir is the Murda Asra here in Teveria. And in Teveria, it is established, lahalacha, certainly, bein kach ubein kach nikran banim. That is why the Gemara says the last stop of the Sanhedrin, whether we make it there today or not, it's somewhere near here, the last stop of the Sanhedrin. There's a chatzi eagle in the vicinity. There's a tradition. There was a seed. What?
Rambam says that the Sanhedrin is going to come back to it.
Right, the Rambam in the Perush HaMishnayos says, in what? In the Achazaka also? Says that the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah that the last stop of the Sanhedrin is Teveria. Umishama sidan ligael. Why? So the Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo says, because in this place it is kavua, it is paskin that halachas like Rabbi Meir ben kach uben kach nikran banim. He says that's why Rabbi Kiva here is also, because if you're going to challenge Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Kiva also agrees ben kach uben kach nikran banim. There's also a tradition Rabbi Meir is buried standing, because Rabbi Meir's chus is only made for Klal Yisrael. Ad Soif Kol Hadoros. Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo is the one who explains why Rabbi Meir is called Bal Hanes. He says because Rabbi Meir is always Malamed Zchus on Klal Yisrael, therefore he is Zoicha that in his merit Nisim are performed for the Jewish people. So this is reasonably Makom Menuchasai of the Emes LeYaakov of Rabbi Yaakov Shaltiel Ninyo. Zechusai Yagin Aleinu. Okay. More important, my phone. Yeah, go. Okay, we have a great zchus to be here at the kever of Reb Chaim Abulafia. The Chidan Hashem Agdolim writes Dvorim Noiraim about Reb Chaim Abulafia. By the way, he's Reb Chaim Abulafia Hazakein, who was a Rav in Chevron in the days of the Chesed Avram. Okay, the grandfather of this Reb Chaim Abulafia was the grandfather of this Reb Chaim Abulafia was the Rav in Chevron in the times of Chesed Avram. This Reb Chaim Abulafia is the author of Eitz Chaim, Mikroi Kodesh, Yosef Lekach, probably not the one that we're familiar with, not the one on Megillas Esther, Yashresh Yaakov, Shavus Yaakov, not the one you're familiar with, Chanan Elokim. He made many takonos in Izmir. He was a Rav in Izmir. At 80 years old, he made Aliyah. He came here in 1742. Can you imagine? At 80 years old, he gave it all up in Izmir. He became the Rav in Teveria. He was very active in building up Teveria. So active, he is the one most responsible for rebuilding the city of Teveria. In his lifetime, the Chida says, Rabu noira oisav v'inyanov ukedushasoi ke'echad meharishonim kemaforsam. His wondrous acts. We mentioned earlier when we were standing by Reb Chaim Abulafia's shul, there was a governor from Syria who came to attack, who shot projectiles and missiles from the opposite mountain where Rabbi Kiva was buried. There was no damage. The missiles literally went in between people's heads, in between people's feet, and Reb Chaim Abulafia guided the missiles with a staff that had various Shemos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was warned that this governor from Syria was coming, and he said, I can't leave the shul that I built. I can't leave the work that I put in over here in the city of Teveria. And in his chus, the city of Teveria was protected, and it was protected from the earthquake that ravaged the city of Tzfas. That was the first earthquake that ravaged the city of Tzfas. And he was nifter on Zayin of Nisan Tuf Kuf Daled, 1744. The wondrous Reb Chaim Abulafia. There's a lashon of the Chida also, of Dvarav Nishmo B'Marim. His words were heard on high. The Or Chaim HaKadosh met with Reb Chaim Abulafia, and in his shul, hopefully we could still get in, legend has it, that was the Makom Rabbi Yochanan wrote the Talmud Yushalmi. In that Makom, that's the Makom where Rabbi Chaim Abulafia was Koiveya Midrashay. Zechusa Yagein Aleinu. Okay, we're continuing here in the ancient cemetery in Teveria by the kever of one of the great personalities in Teveria, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Vitebsk, who was niftar on Rosh Chodesh Iyar in the year 1788. Now, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Vitebsk saw the Baal Shem Tov. He was the Talmud of the Maggid of Mezrich. He was the Maggid of Mezrich's Baal Toikeya. He had many of the early founders of Chasidus were his Talmidim, including the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Baal Tanya, was a student of his. Reb Baruch of Mezhbizh, Rav Yaakov Shimshon Mishpetivka, who's buried down there by Rav Nachman Meir Danka, was also a Talmud of his. In the year 1777, there was a great revolution, and I'm not talking about the American Revolution. I'm talking about a revolution in Chasidus, in Tav Kuf Lamed Zayin. 300 Chasidim made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. Can you imagine such a thing? In 1777, led by Rabbi Menachem Mendel Vitebsk, and it was very difficult for them. But he would say it's par for the course. Like Torah, like Olam Haba, Eretz Yisrael is only nikneh b'yisurim. First he came to Tzfas, he remained there, but it was not, he couldn't stay there. He came to Teveria, and in 1786 he built Beis HaKnesses for Hasidim in Teveria. He wrote a classic sefer about Eretz Yisrael, Pri Haaretz. He brings over here some of the Mamorim of Rav Menachem Mendel Vitebsk. Now this is an interesting one. Rav Menachem Mendel Vitebsk promoted great Achdus. He wanted the Sephardic and Ashkenazic communities to come together, and he even became a mechutin with Reb Chaim Abulafia. He became the mechutin Reb Chaim Abulafia. So he married his daughter to the son of Reb Chaim Abulafia. Now it would have been if he would have married his son to the daughter of Reb Chaim Abulafia, so he's being mashpia on the Reb Chaim. But here he took as a son-in-law, but that was his motto. Actually, it's interesting. He says that I want to give Musar. And I'm only sharing with you because I know people love Musar. People like Musar, The main reason people signed up for this trip is to hear Musar. It's not only, people thought they signed up to get exercise. That's the number 2 reason to sign up. It's good for exercise. The number 1 reason is to get Musar. The Musar is, do not mock Jews who abandon Torah mitzvahs. If you mock Jews who abandon Torah mitzvahs, it causes a great yerida, because you're being poigeya in Rabbi Meir of ben kach u ben kach nikram banim, and by doing so you're mafresh atzmai min atzibor. You could say they left the fold, but don't be misloitzet imahem. Rather follow the teaching of the Zayar that we mentioned on yesterday. Besoich ami anoichi yoishaves. Then he mentions a very beautiful idea. What is taiva? Why do people have taiva? Why do people have desire or lust? It's because the soul comes from the shamayim, olam hatainug. And after it comes down to this world, it's searching for a comparable tainug. But it doesn't find anything real. So it settles for artificial, or it settles for something that's a reduced form of it. But if you channel it to Avodas Hashem, then you could experience great Tainug HaNefesh in Avodas Hashem. Zechusa Yagin Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Okay, we were just at the section of the Talmidei Baal Shem. This is from one of the most eminent Talmidei Hagara. The Chassam Sofer called him Mara da Asra di Yisrael. He's the chief halachic authority of Eretz Yisrael. The Chassam Sofer writes in Shuvas Chashmishpat Siman Yud Beis that I learned his words Be'iyun. I'm not even worthy that he should write to me to speak against great Gedolei Yisrael. He wrote on Masechta Shkolim Taklin Chadatin, and he wrote Pa'as HaShulchan on Zroim. When he came, he suffered great Yisurim because of his Aliyah, through his Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. And in 1814, a great Magefa broke out in Tzfas. He left to Yerushalayim, and that in the course of traveling to Yerushalayim, his wife died. When he got to Yerushalayim, his son was 17, died. His daughter then died at 18. She was left with the little baby that he had to care for. And then he passed away. Then another two of his sons passed away. And then his last daughter. And then his father and mother were ravaged in the earthquake of Tzfas. But he put in tremendous work in building Tzfas. Unfortunately, much of it was destroyed because of the earthquake. But the Gra considered him from his prized Talmidim. The Gra would reveal to him from his secrets, and mimatzpune libai, when the Gra was besimcha rabba, at that time the Gra was magala to Rabbi Somish Galav. Actually, in the Hakdama of the Pasar Shulchan, he brings something very interesting, that the Vilna Gaon said that tremendous secrets of Torah are contained in the musical notes of the Torah, and how the Gra valued the discipline of Zemer, that it was the Gra considered a very important and worthwhile discipline. He was nifter here in Teveria on the 9th of Sivan in the year 1839. Zechusa Yagin Aleinu. Reb Mordechai Bezin of Bulgarai. He's the father of Rabbi Sachar. He's the father of the current Belzer Rebbe. And he was born in 1802 to his father Rabbi Sachar Doiv. And as a young man, he was recognized as a great Eloi. And after his father passed away, he became the Admar of Bulgarai, and he had many Hasidim. He came in 1944. What is that? Together with his brother, Reb Aaron of Belz, the previous Belzer Rebbe. And they were able to continue their work here in Eretz Yisrael, and he's the father of the current Belzer Rebbe. So may all of our tefillos in this makom be niskabel barachmim b'ratzayin. Okay, it's a great zechus to be here in the ancient cemetery in Teveria at the kever of Rabbi Yisrael Mihusiatin. Rabbi Yisrael Mihusiatin was from the Rizhiner dynasty. There's a very powerful story which I think reverberates until this time and should have particular meaning to us today. Yom Sheni leParshas Beshalach, with what's happening in the world. At the time, Hitler's forces were primed to invade Eretz Yisrael. They were stationed in Egypt. There's going to be a great battle at El Alamein, and the prediction was Rommel would pound through the Yishuv. Hitler had a plan to eradicate the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael in 11 days. They already had vans set in place where they would take the exhaust pipe, turn it inward, and gas the Yishuv in 11 days. And all the Gedolim Eretz Yisrael gathered for tefillos, and were bringing Ma'ara people to do tshuva. And Yisrael Mihusiyatin went to the kever of the Or Chaim HaKadosh. And he sat there, and he was mispalel, and he was mischanein, and after very intense tefillos, he said, "They're not coming. They're not coming." So here today, we're also many Yidden around the world await anxiously what's going to be in Eretz Yisrael. There's an enemy not too far from here who has very diabolical plans for the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. So we hope, Be'ez Hashem, in this makom, all of our tefillah for the Klal Yisrael should be niskabel barachim and baratzayin. It's great zechus to be here in the ancient cemetery in Teveria, overlooking the Yam Kinneret, at the kever of Rav Moshe Clares, the author of Tabur Haaretz, one of the classic svarim on the significance of the holy city of Teveria, and may we be zoicha to learn from his great ways and his great teachings. Okay, this makom, Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to get in. Yagata umatzasa tamen. All good things come with effort. You never get in right away to the big places. They're always ikuvim. So the fact that we had to come back a second time, it means there's something very great over here. This makom is recorded in Shar HaGilgulim, in the 37th Hakdama. Reb Chaim Vital writes that in Teveria, within the city, on the edge, on the south side, on the seashore, there's a great Beis HaKnesses that has Kedusha Mizman Kadman. By the way, according to some, the Kedusha already begins from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. The Kedusha is not at the south wall where the Aron is, but rather it's in middle of the length of the Beis HaKnesses on the second arch. Now this is rebuilt. So to know exactly where that was, it's unclear. And the Arizal, whenever he would come to Teveria, would be Kaveh Makam Latvilasai Dafka in that specific spot in the shul, because Ari said it had Kedusha Nifla'a. There was a stone that marked the Makam where the Arizal stayed. I don't know where that stone is today. Maybe it's over here in this area. But what exactly is the Kedusha of this spot? What was the Arizal sensing? What did the Ari recognize was holy about this place? So actually, you'll take a look on one of the clips. We did one quickly on the way out. There is an important sefer about Teveria by Rav Moshe Klers in the sefer Tabor Haaretz, that we have a tradition that this shul that originally stood here, that Reb Chaim Abulafia built in 1742. If you remember on his kever, it said that in 1742 he was stirred min hashamayim to leave Izmir and to come back to Teveria and rebuild Teveria. The significance of this makom is this is where not only did the Arizal sit, that Rabbi Yochanan sat, and he was Koveya Talmud Yerushalmi in this makom, and that's why the Arizal selected and chose this makom to be mispalo. So actually, we're standing now in one of the most significant makomos of Harbatzas Torah in the history of the Jewish people. If you're familiar with the Yerushalmi, there's a difference in expression between the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. In the Bavli, it says Tashma, come and hear. In the Yerushalmi, it says Tachazi, come and see. There's a difference between, the Yerushalmi usually cuts to the chase. There's a certain clarity. There's a certain darkness that the Gemara says associated with the Bavli, which is really its greatness, and that's why we paskin like it. The Gemara says, "B'machashakim hoshivani k'meisi ha'olam" is referring to Talmud Bavli. In any event, the Yerushalmi is begeder Re'iyah, the Bavli is begeder Shmiya. But this was nikva according to tradition in this makom. This is the place that Rabbi Yochanan was redacted, the Talmud Yerushalmi. And we'll say a tefillah over here. Bez Hashem, all of our tefillah should be neskabel barachim and v'ratzim.